Hey everybody, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. I'm Kristen and I search out true stories that involve miracles. So if that sounds neat to you or interesting, follow along and I'm going to get started telling our story for today. A girl named Bahia Bakari, I'm going to call her Bakari, just it's easy to say. She was a 12-year-old girl. She was born August 15th, 1996. Her family, they lived in Paris, France, and she was the oldest child of 4. And on June 30th, 2009, Bakari and her mother were on a trip. They were traveling to Comoros, and they were going to Comoros for a summer vacation. They had some connecting flights, so they started their trip out on a Yemenia Flight 749, and that stopped over in Marseille, and then went back up in the air and then went on to land in Sanas, Yemen. From there, the people that were on board then switched flights and boarded another Yemenia flight. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Yemenia Flight 626. And it was an Airbus A310. And it was the final flight that was headed to Comoros. Now they would have one more stop, and that would be in Djibouti. And it was on the descension there that things went a little awry. The story says that their plane was just minutes away from Prince Said Ibrahim International Airport. And so minutes they would be there and then back up on their way to Comoros. So they were very close, right? But it was on that trip to Djibouti that the plane began to descend, as I said, and the turbulence began to increase. Bakari says that up until that point, their whole flight, the stops and everything had been normal, nothing out of the norm at all. And she said, well, of course I noticed the increased turbulence out of nowhere, but she's 12, so she says that she just thought that was a normal thing because their plane was going down. Shortly after the turbulence began, that's when Bakari says she felt an electric shock go throughout her whole body. And a quote from Bakari, she says, "There's a black hole between the moment when I was seated in the plane and the moment I found myself in the water." End quote. So it's almost like just this black hole, like she just blacked out as the plane, was probably pulling apart at that moment. She said when she awoke, she was extremely weak. She had no energy. And she was in shock, like what just happened? And why am I in the water? Now, Bakari also, she could not swim, nor did she have a life vest. But thankfully, nearby was a large piece of the fuselage, so she grabbed onto that to try to hang on to. And also at this time, Bakari says that, she could hear screams out in the distance. And she said they were mainly female voices screaming out for help. But soon enough, those screams died down. And no one was right near Bakari. She couldn't see or realize where they were coming from. Utterly exhausted, Bakari ends up falling asleep while she's kind of, lunged halfway onto the debris, the fuselage. Poor thing, again, she's just 12. And she said when she woke up, far off in the distance, she could see the coast, but the waters were like very, very choppy and rough. So she's, having to probably hold on with all her might now because as she's getting closer to the coast, the waters were quite choppy there. Bakari says the only thing that kept her going was thinking of her mother. That gave her enough strength and enough, oomph to keep on because she was just so tired. And if you think about it, it makes sense. You've just been through a tragic thing, one. Two, she's, been grasping for dear life onto that piece of debris. for hours and even fell asleep doing it. So that wears you out, using your muscle strength to hold on to something for that long. The 12-year-old Bakari, she drifted for hours, and she did it with no food, no water. So that also, I'm sure, contributed to her exhaustion. And it is said that the Comorian government actually asked for all commercial and private boats to begin helping in the search for any survivors from the crash. And Bakari, she wouldn't learn till later on that she was the only survivor. No one else made it. It was after 12 hours in those choppy waters that Bakari was found and finally pulled to safety by a privately owned ship called the Simacom 2. And actually, when they saw her in the water, she was going under because she barely had strength left at this point to hold on to the fuselage. So she went underwater many times from the choppy waves. So a sailor from the ship actually jumped in because the life preserver that they had thrown her, she wasn't able to grab hold and keep a hold on it. And with her going under, he's like, no, I got to help her. So he jumps in, thank goodness, to help rescue her and help get her on board the ship. Once finally aboard, bless her heart, they gave her a warm drink, dry blankets, and just kind of made sure that she was okay. The ship arrived in Port Moroni, and that's where Bakari was taken to a hospital just to be checked out, see if she was indeed okay. And it was the very next morning that they actually transported Bakari back to her hometown in Paris. And they flew her on a private French government jet. And I when I was reading this story, I was like, bless her heart. She's 12. She's just been through a traumatic plane crash, and then the very next day they take her up on another plane. But she was probably still in so much shock at that point. She didn't seem, or at least I didn't read, where she was hesitant or scared to go back up in the air. Once back in Paris, she's reunited with her dad and her siblings, and she finds out, of course, that her mother did not make it. She was the only survivor. And then also in Paris, they ended up taking her to a children's hospital. And she was actually admitted and diagnosed with several things. And I'm not sure why they didn't catch this at the other hospital before they flew her back. I was kind of confused by that. But anyway, she was sent to a children's hospital and admitted for 3 weeks because she had a fractured pelvis, a fractured collarbone, exhaustion was still a problem, dehydration, burns on her knees, and several scrapes, cuts, and bruises, which none of those injuries were life-threatening, of course. So maybe that's why they didn't, or maybe they didn't have the equipment to do scans and find all that. I don't know, at the other hospital. But either way, at least now she was getting treatment, and she did have a little bit of surgery, probably to correct either the pelvis or fractured collarbone. And she was there 3 weeks, and then they sent her home. Now, looking back at what maybe caused the crash, it is thought that it was the pilot's failure to stabilize the plane's altitude during the circling. You know how planes circle the airport when they're getting ready to descend or on their descent. It was during that maneuver that they failed to stabilize the plane properly. And because of that, the plane actually stalled in the air, thereby dropping and crashing, unfortunately. It was in 2022 that the French court ruled that Yemenia was guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The airline, of course, denied responsibility and tried to appeal and all that. But yeah, all in all, officials did end up saying that they didn't find any reason to suspect foul play and that the accident was just caused by inappropriate action by the crew during an unstabilized maneuver. In the weeks following the crash, they did find 27 of the bodies in the ocean. They did not find the others from the reports that I read. They did use underwater robots and ended up finding the flight recorder eventually as well. So all in all, every last one, all 152, so there was 153 aboard, including Bakari, but all 152 did unfortunately perish. Now, to this day, Bakari doesn't have any lasting injuries, so that is a good thing. But she does say she struggles with sadness from time to time, which I would too, I'm sure, because she says she just thinks about her mother quite a bit. And there's not one that, within these stories that I find that does not have like the survivor's guilt type thing. It didn't say that in reports that I read about Bakari, but I'm just kind of assuming here that's usually a thing with any kind of major disaster like this and survivors in general. Bakari is now 28 years old and she works in real estate. She ended up co-writing a book called Bahia, the Miracle Girl. So that has more of her in-depth story and maybe a little bit about her background. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to read that one yet, but definitely indeed a miracle. From everything from her survival to the sailor jumping in to help her, it's crazy to think how somebody could survive something like that. Maybe also a blessing that it happened over water, obviously. I don't know what would have happened if it wasn't, but then again, we can't say that now that I think about it, because a recent story, Cecilia Sitchin, for instance, hers wasn't over water and she was the only survivor. So, I guess I have to retract that former statement. But either way, God is in control and he has reasons that he allows certain people to survive. And it's hard to think about the others that did not make it and why that had to occur. That's a hard thing to think about. And I'm sure it's very hard for any and all survivors that had to go through it and be the only survivor. I can't imagine what that must be like. Let me know what you thought of this story, and perhaps you'd heard about it before. This is another one where I did not know about it. And it amazes me. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I really, really appreciate it. I just love it. So thank you. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'm going to see you for the next one.